I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 10. Now, I know a few of you are going to be sad to hear this, but today should mark the ending of our modern industrialization journey, assuming that we can get all of our components together and finally make the fuel rods. And that's simply because the only things needed to complete the All the Mods star is going to be the casings, the blast-proof casings, which we now have and we can easily make, and the uranium fuel rods. But let me just kind of say, there's still a lot we still have left to do before we fully can craft these fuel rods today. And I think without further ado, we should get started. And so to start today's episode, we're making another EBF. Yes, another electronic blast furnace. This one just regular tier, and something we would have set up a long time ago, honestly. But we actually had a few skips allowing us to not need soldering fluid, which is actually what I'm about to make. So what I need to do is inside this mixer, I need to assign a couple of things. So we are going to be sending it tin and lead dust to make soldering iron. Now I am going to swap these out with the appropriate ones, just like this. And then we just need to mix our ingots in here, and we'll use exporters to get all of that into here. So yes, we're going to have this sending into here, and this is going to be making the soldering, and then we're just going to have that soldering send into the EBF, and this should have a liquid output that is going to be our soldering fluid. Now, why exactly do I need soldering alloy at this point? Because we haven't needed it up to this particular point. And that is because it is required as one of the base components for making the first base uranium fuel rod. So we need it inside of an assembler, and to have this constantly producing these, we are going to need to provide it soldering alloy and also helium. Now, thankfully, helium in this process, this whole process, is actually generated through something that we're going to need anyways to make higher tier fuel rods, and that is the production of cadmium. And the way that we're actually generating helium is through our centrifuge by breaking down that monzonite dust. So you can see we're getting cadmium, and cadmium is something we're actually going to need in order to make these nuclear mixed plates. And we also get a bunch of other stuff, but yeah, we get a byproduct of helium. We're storing that already, and we're looking pretty good at this point. So now at this point, you're probably wondering, how's our blast proof plates looking? And I will say it's looking mighty fine. We have 1.9 thousand in here, and this is still producing and just sending over here. I do have this accelerated, the compressor, just making sure this produces them instantly. I put a limiter upgrade in here to keep a few of the curved plates on here. And I also started smelting up some of our cadmium dust that we have producing and that I mentioned earlier, and having those just converted into plates for right now. That way we'll have access to them when we need to start making this recipe right here. Now, speaking of this recipe, we have the soldering alloy out of the way, but we're actually missing one other component that is needed for these nuclear mixed plates, and that is beryllium. And as of right now, we haven't been producing any beryllium, so I think it's time to take a look at how we do this. And this right here is the process. We need to take crushed emerald dust, and we need to essentially just electrolyze it. This has got to be one of the easier things we're going to be doing today. And then we take the beryllium, we unpack it, and this is where we get into the more advanced part. Yes, we'll talk about that here in a second, but let's go ahead and get this added to one of our trees. You know what, we might as well just add it to this length over here, which it kind of fits in with all of our other sort of electrolyzing machines. Before I set this up, I do want to take the time to thank you guys for all of your helpful comments. And honestly, they have helped me a lot. I have technically learned a lot, and I will be able to apply a lot of the things I learned this go around into future setups if we ever need to do this mod in the future. And I feel like I will only get better at setting these things up the more times I do it and the more helpful comments I get from you. So of course, if you have any helpful tips, for example, about this, which I know I'm recording right now, but if you have any helpful tips that you want to share with others who may be looking in the comments section, definitely share those, because unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of good videos and good documentation about this mod in particular. So the only way we can spread information is by, of course, sharing it with others. So of course, comment down below if you have some important tips that maybe I didn't necessarily show in today's episode, but you definitely have used in the future. So definitely share it down in the comments below. And I thank you guys all for commenting and letting me know cool tips and tricks. Thank you. So now let's look at making beryllium, and this beryllium setup right here is definitely going to get soul surged because we need the macerator here to be producing as much of this emerald dust as possible to kind of jumpstart this whole operation. And of course, using the wrench, I want to make sure to rotate this to the bottom face. I love the ability to do all of this. I'm almost positive though there is a way to copy settings. I have not used a whole lot of that, because I've actually kind of found enjoyment in manually setting all of the machines. I know, call me weird. But right here is kind of what I want to do. I do need to get a fluid pipe. And I want to send the fluid. It's going to actually work just like this centrifuge over here, where we're going to have a fluid pipe connected here. And we need to make sure this is set to pull to send the excess fluid that this is going to be generating, which is going to be oxygen, by the way. Now the oxygen, I'm probably going to add to the network, but also make sure it can void that oxygen if too much builds up. But I think we'll be fine in the oxygen department, as it does look like our oxygen is just being instantly used as it's generated. And man, these overdrive modules really do make a difference in a setup like this, right? Because it's going to hold the efficiency that is going to build up over time. And it's so nice that you can just hold that efficiency. Even if the machines technically fill up, if I pull more out, they're going to jump right back into action with the same efficiency they had when they started. And so perfect. Here is our first operation. Definitely want to make sure to lock this drawer and then add it to our network. Same with that, lock and add it to the network. Oh, and by the way, just in case you're wondering how fast these macerators can get when they're accelerated and just have basic upgrades in them, yeah, it's pretty darn quick. Now, there's still a few more things we need to do before we set up our implosion compressor, aka the EBF, essentially. But before we do that, we need to technically make a few things. So we need to make this right here, which is going to require a few different chemicals, nitrogen, and then the toluene, I think I'm saying that right, or toluene. This right here is going to be used to make industrial TNT, which is going to be required for converting a lot of things inside of this implosion compressor, basically the primary ingredient for just about everything that is involved here. Of course, aside from a singularity, which is pretty late game thing. But everything here requires this. So we might as well get a constant supply of this stuff. It's not going to be that difficult, I think. A lot of those ingredients that I have, I am producing quite a bit of, and these don't all use a whole lot. Like nitrogen, for example, we have like 44,000 buckets, it looks like, in our storage. And the toluene, this stuff right here only uses 250 millibuckets, in which I think I have like quite a bit of it as well. Yeah, I have 248 buckets just sitting in here. This all comes, by the way, from the distillation tower. And now I know this may seem a little repetitive. I've shown this several times, but of course, making sure whenever you do make something like this to lock it if there's multiple things going in, and then always make sure to set it to the scheduling mode if you're using AE to make sure it just evenly distributes everything and round robins things. And that's exactly what I'm going to be working on here. As soon as we get all of this put together, get it powered, and then make sure that its destination is set and locked, we should be producing an abundance of the industrial TNT. You can see these items going in here. I think on sand, though, I do need a crafting card just to make sure that it does produce all of this. But yeah, just to speed things up on this one, I am going to be upgrading it and making sure those crafts are in there. Look at that, it's nice and filled up. The sand should also do the same. And perfect. We're producing industrial TNT. Good old ITNT. No, not you. So with our industrial TNT, there's a couple of other things that I need to do. I'm going to go ahead and start unpacking some stainless steel. Now I could do an auto craft for this, but I just want to keep these in stock since we're going to be using quite a bit of them. And it also lets me limit these a little bit better. So I'll make sure that's dropping in there and auto exporting. Perfect. That can be locked and added to the system. And then I also need to take the beryllium dust that we're using, and I need to unpack this. Now, this is a recipe, I do believe, that the only way you can get the tiny beryllium. Oh wait, no, you can actually do an autocraft for this too. So I'm not going to do it that way though. I am going to keep it constantly produced with a unpacker. And I think going about it this way, it just seems like right versus doing a bunch of autocrafts like that. Now, one more thing before we get into that, we also are going to need to set up and start producing, I think, our fuel rods. And that way we can have a few of them built up. And so I do want to get the assembler set up. I'm going to place the assembler where our other assemblers are at for this, but we do need our rods. So go ahead and have that auto output here. There we go. And so now we have uranium rods produced. And yes, I could use an autocraft for this, but it's a little bit more efficient on our uranium, which I am using for other things technically. So for example, our fission reactor is using uranium, so it makes a little bit more sense trying to make this as efficient as possible. And we're going to need a lot of them. It looks like it's like 16 per individual, or 18 per individual rod here. So now this right here is going to be something right here that we're going to be producing. So helium soldering, we've got to make sure all of these components in their individual states are being supplied to this, and making sure we put the right rod in here. And so this right here should be everything. And then I just need to assign it into our exporter. And I'm definitely going to need a crafting upgrade, and that should be just about everything needed for that. I do want to make sure that it exports to the bottom, and I did go ahead and put a downgrade to only keep 64 in stock for these. And voila, we are really getting there. And I don't know if you can hear it in the excitement in my voice. All of this stuff is slowly starting to come together. Oh man, this is really good. And you know what? I don't know if I should be excited. I want to be super excited, but I do know that this is really kind of almost a starting point for some people in this mod, but it feels really, really good to get to this point with all of the stuff that we've put together so far, and to feel like we're actually achieving a goal within this bottom section here. And uranium fuel rods, we're not there yet, but we're almost there, and that's the important part. As I do feel like you could possibly get easily discouraged if you started scouring through all of the recipes for that fuel rod. Yeah, that could easily probably trigger a lot of people to get discouraged. And unfortunately, there's not a good way to fix that aside from just taking things bit by bit. But if you don't really know how the things are structured, then you're going to also have a hard time getting through this. But I mean, if you've played factory games in the past, it is a little bit easier if you kind of break everything down and make sure you're making a machine for every individual thing, and getting this sort of array of individual components set up honestly is what makes this so nice. So now the moment that you have all been waiting for, the implosion compressor. And I kind of spoiled it earlier when I mentioned EBF. And that's because I was actually expecting for there to be some sort of fancy multi-block that was different from all of these. But no, it's just like the blast freezer. It's just like the regular EBF. We are going to be technically building another EBF just with different machine components. And this is how I mentioned before that things are kind of repetitive in this mod. And this is a good example of that. So though, let's go ahead and build this thing. All of these components leading up to this, which does require the titanium plates and all kinds of other goodies. So we've just got to get that crafted up, which should craft pretty fast. It would be even faster on this craft, by the way, if I had steel plates that were just being constantly generated, which I never did, unfortunately. But there we go. Automated creeper. You gotta love these. But yes, if I place this down, we are going to see that this looks just like the setup for the EBF. Now, something to kind of note, I think we can use different hatches. I think we might still be able to use steel hatches on here. Now, the power though, I'm probably going to use MV power for right now, but I think you could probably use the turbo or the HV, which uses turbo, if we really wanted to. So the hatches are going to work just like we've used on every other EBF we've set up. I think I want to input like 4 different items here, and I think we can use an advanced hatch, which I think has more input slots. And yes, the advanced item input has 4 slots here, which means that we can go ahead and define our recipe. And this makes things a little bit easier where we don't have to have multiple hatches doing all kinds of different things. Instead, what we can do is we can use the basic one here, and I can go ahead and say, this is the recipe I want to send to it. And I can go ahead and drag those items in and lock those items in their position. That is super useful. So locking all of these and then setting that individual recipe here will make the process of sending the items in so much easier. Look at that. We can even adjust the value here to set the amount that we want to always keep in stock inside of that hatch. And since we're only outputting 1 item, I'm going to also just use a regular steel item output hatch, and that also works. And so this leaves me with only needing 14 of these titanium machine casings. It does look like I didn't make the recipe for the rings. Not a big deal. We can go ahead and add that crafting recipe in here. This is how I've been doing like all of the base components and just craft them up so fast. We're going to see how fast that is right now. So yes, back to this. We need 14 because we're using 3 other slots down here. There it goes. That was instantaneous. And then we also need the blast-proof casings. These are going to be 16, which is exactly the same setup as we've used for all of our other machine setups. Multi-blocks, that is. So there we go. There's that. This is going to line it just like so. There we go. Those heat or blast-proof casings for the explosions to take place in. And then on the top, we'll fill this in. And voila, the multi-block should be done. And all of our hatches will change color, letting you know that it's done, and the valid shape will be ready. So I guess it's now time for the fun part, actually hooking this up and making the only other component that we need. Now, we're going to have to build more than one of these particular machines, but for right now, we are going to be making the beryllium ingot. This is the only way to make that beryllium ingot. And so it's moment of truth time. We have to send each one of these in, making sure we have it on scheduling mode. We're going to send our TNT, our beryllium tiny dust, and the stainless steel that we just got produced. That will fill up in here, should look really good. Give this some power, and that is going to start outputting our components. So I hope. It says status active. It's got all of the ingredients, and there it goes. It instantly made that beryllium ingot and already spit that beryllium ingot out. Oh, this is so good. Now we just got to get a storage for the items going in. And so with all of this sped up, this is producing the beryllium quite fast. I don't think we're going to need a whole lot of it, but we will need enough to start making some plates out of it. And those plates are going to be used for our next step, which is going to be nuclear mixed plates. And you know what? I can go ahead and make those plates just by putting a pusher upgrade in here to send the beryllium into a compressor. And I guess we could just link it right here and just set the output to the top of the machine and have it auto output the plates right into another functional storage. At this point though, we have been doing a lot of unpacking, but now it's time for some packing. So the thing we're going to be sending over here is going to be the mixed nuclear plates, or what we're going to be making. So all of our cadmium plates that we're producing, the beryllium plates, and also the blast proof need to be sent over here. I'm also going to be limiting these as well to make sure we do not keep too many of these in stock. It's going to be one at a time, essentially getting sent in, kind of slowing the process down, and then we're going to be dumping those directly down into here. Then I need to make another EBF. Implosion compressor. And now that I have the implosion compressor up and running, we are able to then take those nuclear mixed plates and convert them into nuclear alloy plates using basically the same method that we just did before. However, we only have 2 items that we're going to be inputting specifically for this recipe here. And so last but not least, export bus essentially sending out, making sure it's scheduling the nuclear mixed plates industrial TNT. And when this goes in and everything is ready to go, assuming we have industrial TNT, which may not be producing fast enough, because of this over here. We may have to kind of limit our input here. Then that should switch over. Let's actually check on our industrial TNT production. It's struggling. Yeah, I think it would probably help if we actually had a flint recipe. Yeah, this might actually make crafting this stuff a whole lot easier if I just simply had some flint. So yes, that is now working, and we have a crafting card there. And yeah, okay, so now we have the TNT, and I think this will evenly split. It may not. Ah, here we go. Yeah, and we already have our nuclear alloy plates. And on this, I think I'm also going to use a stack downgrade. Essentially, we're going to use an iron downgrade here to limit that it can only hold 64 of these. And believe it or not, my friends, that is essentially the hardest part for getting the fuel rods done. We have the ability to make cases, which are required for the ATM Star. And now we just need to pack everything together and create ourselves fuel rods. And that simple process is going to involve 2 drawers, 2 packers here, and just some exporters to send our ingredients. Just a couple of iron downgrades to make sure we're limiting these to 64 inside of a drawer. Set our first recipe to being a nuclear alloy plates and uranium fuel rods, which I can set the limit to 2 fuel rods. And then on this recipe, limiting it to just simply 1 being allowed inside. And then the other machine requiring 2 fuel rods. And we can go ahead and set that recipe and 2 alloy plates. And all of this is just going to build, and it's going to start producing. Like this is really, really nice what we have going right here. And the final output is going to be our uranium quad fuel rods, which is the rods that are required for the ATM Star. And so last but not least, because all of this stuff is set up and ready to go, uranium fuel rods, alloy plates, and then over here, we're going to do the double uranium rods and alloy plates. And that's basically all this needs, along with some gates slapped on here to give it some power. And there we go. I don't know how long this is going to take. It looks like this does need 2. It should end up getting 2 fuel rods, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it does require 2. And we definitely have more than 2, or at least we should have more than 2, unless I'm missing something here. Interesting. Okay, so the fuel rods don't stack, and I didn't realize that. So the fuel rods will only accept 1 in the container at any given moment. I wonder if it can hold like a stack in here. I bet it probably is also limited. So this is going to take some time because each craft is going to be required before it ultimately holds it. Am I looking at this right? Or does this actually need another fuel rod in the bottom here in order to do it? Ah, so the recipe just looked funny. Okay, so this is also going to require another slot for the double. Okay, that's interesting. And there we go. So once this is done and we have this locked, then this is going to channel those over and is going to send the fuel rod over here. It's just interesting that it only holds 1. But there we go. One's all we really need technically. So locking that, set the drawer, and now we have quad uranium fuel rods done. Yeah, we just did that. And so now after all of that work, all of these multi-block machines, all of this setup, I now have all of the individual components that are needed for the All the Mods Star that involve modern industrialization, starting with the motor. And now we also have the blast-proof casing and also the uranium quad fuel rod. My goodness. So now, so far, in my opinion, this has to be one of the hardest challenges that is a part of the Star in the All the Mods 10 mod pack as of right now. Things may change in the future, but as of right now, this, in my opinion, has been one of the most challenging, I would say. I can't say that I didn't have fun, because I had a lot of fun with this mod, believe it or not. And typically I would have shied away from this mod and probably not even messed with it had it not been a part of the Star. So honestly, kind of cool. And I did learn a lot, and it also giving us the ability to use power in place of the whole EU Steam mechanic is really nice. And I was able to explore this mod more than I ever would have been had it been for that whole power limitation section. So now with the automation done up to this point, I think I'm going to leave it for right now. We might still jump back into this in the future, and I can definitely toy around with this and explore from here. And also, whenever the world download is prompted, you guys will have access to all of this stuff, essentially starting you at this position where I'm currently at. So if you wanted to explore more of the modern industrialization, be sure to check out the Discord, and also think about possibly supporting, as you will gain access to the world downloads, and you'll have all of this to kind of explore for yourself, and maybe even create a test world with it. Now, I know I asked you guys to comment before, but what has been your thoughts so far on this part of the series? Did you enjoy the MI videos? Did you enjoy this modern industrialization sort of adventure? Of course, let me know down in the comments below, what was your thought about this mod as a whole, and or the experience that was in this particular pack. I would love to hear from you down in the comments below. And of course, I think this is a good wrapping up point for today's episode. A little bit shorter of an episode, but I hope you guys basically can use all of this to get through the modern industrialization part in your All the Mods playthrough. So guys, with that, if you did enjoy, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give this video a huge thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And of course, it's now time to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go out to none other than Knight. Thank you so much for your amazing support and choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and getting access to the world downloads, the supporter servers, and all kinds of other fun things. Thank you so very much. And of course, you basically allow me to make videos just like these. And of course, guys, if you did enjoy, I'll hope to see you in the next episode. And as always, thanks for watching.